Jesus.
All right, so this is what we are going to be working on today. By now, you guys should have been doing a full web page, but you guys don't want to do it. So look at the design, and I hope the design is going to be a simple one for you. Here now, you're supposed to know all the element you need to use. Because here now, we've talked about all the elements that they are using for this particular design. Is it a text? Is it a form? The only one I know that is going to be different here is this, but nothing special. It's just combination of two elements combined together to form this. But you know that this is radio here. So we have check. This is radio. This is another radio. Beside it, you have the content. But how do you do it like this? That's where your grouping element comes in there like that. So, and don't forget, I always mention this thing a lot. Before you can start doing anything like CSS, you need to know how to group your element together when you see a design. So when you see a design, the first thing that needs to come to your mind is how do I lay out this uh content so that by the time I apply my CSS, everything is going to work accordingly. So look at this design now. It's not just any simple design like that. It's simple, but still not that simple. Because here we have the way it is. This is the way it is on the mobile, and this is the way it is on the desktop. So if you look at the desktop, you see that the first name and the last name they are placed side by side. But email is not like that. Again, too, the query type is placed side by side. Then the message too is not placed, and this other one too are not placed. So the way you are going to group these two will be different from the way you are going to group this one because of the way they are being placed side by side. But you know that when you go to mobile, everything is just on one, like everything is on a separate line. So this is just the application of flex property that we have been talking about right from day one of the CSS property. Because everything that is going on here, what you just need is a flex property. But the major thing is that you need to know how to work with the layout. Because flex will not work properly if you don't lay out the content inside the HTML the way you are supposed to do it. And if you are looking at this design here, if you want to work on it, the first thing you need to do is to firstly, group all this content together based on the way you want to apply your CSS property. So let me bring out my pen, and from there I will draw out how you have to group this element, because that's the first thing. Not just jumping into the HTML and start typing. No, you need to firstly look at the design you want to work on. Then based on the way all these elements are cooked together, because you have to look at it from the desktop and the mobile perspective there. Because if you look at it on the mobile, everything is stacked, and on the desktop, some of them are stacked while some are placed side by side. So if you have to work on this designer, this is how you have to lay out the content on the page, which is your HTML. So everything here is always going to be our body. This is always the body. So this is always the body. Then after you get the body, I'm going to be using the main element for this one, which is one that is going to group everything together. If you want, you can just use the form directly. So, or I'm going to use the form directly since everything are inside form and none of them are outside the form. But if we have other content outside, then you can group with main first, then the form will be the one that will have all the items inside it, and the content will just follow that form. But since we really have form here, so we can just use the form as the grouping element for all the content that is inside it there. And inside the form, we are going to have this area there, which is the title of the page, which we are going to be using H1, so to represent this one. So we are going to be using H1 for this, which is our title of the page. But apart from this, if you look, this is where the major problem is going to come. Like, this is where things might look difficult there. But it's not that difficult. You just need to look at the way the element are combine together, and based on that you put them in the appropriate container. So if you look at this one now, you see that all of them here, they are in a particular container, and that's the reason why you are able to put them side by side. So the first name box here and this last name box, they are in a particular container. So when you are controlling this container, it will only affect the box that is inside it without touching any other content. So here there is a container that wraps everything here. There is another same container that wraps this one. Again, we have container that is wrapping all this one here, and at the same time we have the same container, and here too we have another one. So this is another container before you now have this your button here. So when you want to put all this thing together, there is a container that is grouping each one of these elements together, because it's not just one element that is here. Even this one, the email and the input is being grouped together. So this one too and everything inside it are being grouped. The same thing with the message. So this message is the label and this is your text area. So now the major stuff here is this first two and this the query type here. The first name and the last name and this query type, because those one here they still go further. So inside this place we still have other grouping element that we are using to group this particular first name and its own box. So this one here is having its own group, and at the same time this one too is having its own group. So when you want to create this one, this is how it's going to be. So we have the box, which is a white, which is going to be the form, but inside the form we have other elements inside it that are grouping other elements together. So the first one here we have the H1 because it's just a normal text, it's just one content that is here. But if it is more than one content, you know that you need to put it in a group so that those content are going to be in their own particular group there, which is what we are doing down here. So everything inside this box are going to have their own group too, which is this first name, which is the label and the input. And again too, you are going to add another group, which is this last name and the sum box. So when you now display this one as flex, you know that it's going to place them side by side. Not the first name will go to on its own separate, because we are now putting all those one too in their own box. So in order for you to be able to do this thing, you need to understand the concept of flex box. You know, when you're dealing with flex box, it works with a container and item. So here now, this is a container. When we display it as flex and we change the direction to column, you see that this content will be at the top. All this one will be follow, this one will follow, this one will follow, this one will follow, followed by this and followed by this, because we are using the flex direction of column. But there is going to be a problem if you separate this first name and last name. If you separate them, it's going to place this last name under the first name, because that's the way we mention it from here, that everything should be stacked on top of each other. But that's not what we want. We want this first name and the last name to be side by side. And in order for them to be side by side, it means you have to put them in their own box, and that box is what you now control. So you display that one too as flex, and when you display anything by as flex by default, it always place them side by side, but you can actually change the direction there. And this is what you need to do in order for you to be able to achieve this design. The same thing here too, the same thing down here too. You say that inside this place you have this is how this one is going to be done. So here, this is the label, but after this label you see that these two boxes are in their own container too. Why are they inside their own container? Because we want to place them side by side. If you don't put them in a container like this one now, this box is going to be seeing them as a different item, and since it's going to be seeing them as different item, it will place this query type, this general query and support query side by side. But that's not what we want, and since we don't want it to be like that, we only want to focus on these two here. So that's the reason why I'm grouping them together. But there too, this one too, they're having their own group too, and that's what you'll be doing based on the way you have your element be arranged together. So this box too, this is another group on its own, and inside it you now have this your radio, and you have its own kind of like the text inside it, which is what we have on this right hand side too. So we have this box, you have the radio, and at the same time you have the text for that particular radio. And this is how this thing use to work. So before you can start applying any CSS, the first thing you need to do is to look at your page, and you look at all these elements are being put together without a line. This is what you are seeing. But this thing go more than this. When you want to arrange your element, or when you want to lay out the element inside the HTML, there's a lot of other grouping element you need to do, even though it's not showing. But based on the way you work with Flex, we give you the experience to kind of oh, this element, oh, they are supposed to be like this. I'm supposed to group them in order for me to be able to apply this property. Because if you don't do it properly, you can't just type this first name, last name, type this first name and the box, last name and its own box, and you now display the parent as Flex, and you now be expecting them to be side by side. No, it will not work like that, because this one entire box like this is just seeing everything here as one item. Again, everything here is just seeing it as one item too. Everything here too is one item. Everything here is one item. So how is this white box is going to be seeing them as one item, even though they are different elements? You have to group them, because don't forget, the Flex only works, the container only works on the direct item. Any one of them that is not direct item, then it will not work on it. And that's the reason why you have to group the element properly. So I will go into the designer, and I will keep drawing all this line one by one again. The first line that we have there is our body, which is the normal stuff that you can generate easily there from the HTML. So let me go to the file, and we can start working on our page. So let me generate the basic structure, which is going to be contact us, which is like the contact us page, like that. So here we're going to have the body, which is what we have already. Then after the body, what do we need next? So let me move the two of them side by side so that we can see them at once, instead of just okay. Let me put this in here. Yes, so let me bring this one. Let me delete this, start again. So we have our body already, and inside the body we are going to have the form. So the next thing we need to have is the form. So the next thing we need to have is the form. So inside the body, I'm going to create my form here. But inside the form, we have different items inside it. And the first item that we have inside the form is this one here, which is this contact us. And if you look at it, this one is just a normal text. And how do you represent this one? Since this is our first heading on the page, so we can use our H1, which I'm going to use is H1 with the text that is inside it. So saved. So we have that part, which is the simplest one among all of them. This is the simplest one, along with this button down here. But other one, they are not that simple. Even though on the page, they look simple like that, but it's not, because there is a lot of grouping you need to do in order for you to be able to achieve this layout. So after the H1, the next thing we have here is this other box here. So we have this box, and this box is the one that is holding this box here, and at the same time is holding another box here. So inside one box, which is this outer one, we have two boxes there. And these two boxes here, the first one is for this first name and this the input. The second one is for this label and this input. So if you want to create this one now from the HTML, what do we need to do? What we need to do here is to have the div, which I'm going to call this first. So in order for me to be able to target it from CSS, I'll call it first and last name box like this. So first and last name box. So in order for me to be able to work with it from the CSS, to target it from the CSS, I will just call this first and last name box. You can call it any name you want, or you can select it in different way. But in order for us to be able to target it easily, I'm giving it a class. So this outer one here is what I call this first last name box. But inside it, you see that we have the one for the first name and we have the one for the last name, which is something I'm going to call a form group, because what is happening here is what is happening down here. And since they are the same thing, so I will just give it a class of a form group like this. You can call this one to anything. This form group is just a div. And what is the div going to do? The div is the one that will hold this first name and this box. Again, too, I'm going to have another div, which is going to be the one that will hold the last name and this box too. So inside it, how do we create that text? You know that that's label. When you are working with your input, what you have is there is label, So this label is going to be for the first name, that's the ID of my input, and this one is going to have a first name with that asterisk, which kind of denote that this thing is required. So I will have the input, and this input is going to be of type text, and the ID of it is going to be first name like this. And why am I using this ID of first name is because I want to connect the label and the input together. So that anytime I click on the label, it's as if I'm clicking on the input. If you look at it, the 4 of the label is the same thing as the ID of the input. So both of them will be connected together. And once you click on this label, it will activate the box automatically. And this will just complete the first one. But we need to do the same thing for the second one too. So the same, what we have for this first one is still the same thing for the second one. The difference between them is just the label that is there, the text of the label. So since they are the same thing, I will just duplicate this one and update the label so that it matches what we have there. So instead of it to be this first, I will just change it to last because that's what is there. So last, and again, to this one should be capital L. And if I save it, we just complete this one here. What we did here, what we did here is just for this second group here. So the first group that we have is this content here, which we are using this H1 for. The second one is this entire box here. Like everything you are seeing here is this entire box. And why do we have to put it in a separate box? The reason we have to put it there is because both of them are placed side by side. By the time we are displaying this our form later on to be stacked, we don't want this first name and the last name too to follow that pattern when it's on the desktop. We want them to be like this. And since you want them to be like this, you need to put it in a group so that you can talk to that group separately without you affecting other content that you have on the page. Because if you don't have this group, you have to do it from the form. And if you do it from the form, it will affect this email, it will affect this message because it will place, you'll be placing them side by side. But that's not what we want. On the form, stack everything together. But when you get to this box here, I want you to be side by side on desktop, but still on the mobile, I want them to be on top of each other, which is quite simple because you'll be using your media query to do this added. So we just complete this box. So the next box that we have there is simple, which is just this one. So we only have this email and we have this one here. And if you look at it, you see that the same thing that we have here is the same thing as the first name and the last name. So since they are the same thing, I'm going to borrow this form group here. And that's this why I give it this form group so that I can style them because what is here is the same thing for the last name, it's the same thing for the first name. The difference between them is just where you are placing them. So after this one, I'm going to create another div again with this form group like this because I want to use one class to style the generic one. And inside it, we're going to have the label, which is going to be that email. So this is going to be email like this. Is this thing listening to me? So here we're going to have an email address. So asterisk like this. Then after this one, I will have the input of type email like that. So the name, I don't need the name, but let me just put it like this. What I actually need is the ID, which is going to be email because the ID should always match whatever you have inside this your file so that everything can be perfect there. So now if I save this one, you see that cancel. We see that now we have this is the first one. Let me separate them. So the first one, the first group is this H1. The second one is this entire box here, which is what is representing this first name and the last name. But they need to be in a group so that you can talk to them without talking to any other content that we have on the page. So the next one that we have there, so the next one that we have there is this one here. But this one too is complex. It's not like what we have at the top here. So if you look at this one too, we are going to have a container. We're going to have a container that is grouping everything together here. So this one too, I need to create a container. And what do I call it? So here, I will give it its own class too, so that I can select it easily. Which I'm going to call it the query type group, like this. So I'm going to call it the query type group. This is a div. But this div here, this is the blue. This div here now is a blue box here. But inside this blue box, we have label. So inside the blue box, we have this label. And apart from this label, we have another group again, that is grouping these two together. Why do I need to do this? The reason I have to do this is because whatever I want to do on these two boxes, I don't want it to affect my label. If you don't group it like this, if you just talk to this the outer group, it will affect this label and it will affect these two items too. And since we don't want it to happen like that, so we need to put these two in their own group so that we can talk to them separately without touching the label. So the way you have the corner on the page, that's the way you keep drawing all this line and you'll be generating the element there. So we have the label here. So this one is not connected to anything for now, which is going to be this query type with this asterisk too. So after the label, we need to have a div with the radio group. So this radio group is this inner blue here. So this inner blue is the one that is going to group these two boxes together. So which I'm going to is not radio, is radio group like this, radio group. And inside this one, let me give it a box because it goes more than this. Or let me just say a group like this. So inside this one too, inside this one, we are going to have another box again. Inside this one, we're going to have another box. Because if you look at it, inside this one, we have the radio and we have the text. So in order for us to have the two of them two side by side, we need to put it in a group. And that's what I will be creating this group for. So I'm going to create another group, which is going to be this radio group. So radio, or let me just call it radio box like this. So radio box. And inside this radio box, we're going to have this radio and we're going to have this text. So we're going to, this thing is listening to me, you know. Okay, thank you for to complete. So look at it here. I have this div for this radio box. So we have the inputs of type radio because the circle that you are seeing here is the radio. And beside it, we have this query here, which is supposed to be general inquiry. That's what's supposed to be here. So here it is going to be general inquiry like this. So the ID is going to match whatever you have there if you want to connect them together like that. And again, I can duplicate this one because we have the second one here too, which is this support request. So we have the second one, which is this support request. And this one, I'm going to give it 2. So 2. Don't forget the ID should always be unique. So the first one is using 1 already. So this one is going to be support request like this. So we just complete this group. So for this group, let me draw the line again. For this group, let me go back. Let me draw the line again. So for this group, what do we have there? We need to group everything together because from this form, it needs to see them as one item. And in order for you to see them as one item, that's where this group is coming from. So this group, this one here, is the one that is going to group everything together. But inside this group, we have separate elements inside it. And since these elements are not following the same layout, we need to put each one of them too in a group. And if you look at it, the first thing we have there is the label. So this label is standing on its own. And again, these two blocks are placed side by side. Since these two blocks are placed side by side, what do we need to do? We need to create a group for that. So since the two blocks are placed side by side, we need to create a group. So this group now is what we'll be talking to later on to place this one and this one side by side. If you don't place it in a group and we just put it directly inside this top group, it will be affecting this label because it will be seeing them as same item. And since we'll be seeing them as same item there, then you see that this query too will go to the side of all this box, which is not what we want. And if you place them on top of each other, it means this support request too will come down. That's not what we want. We want this general query box and the support request box to be side by side, but the query type will be at the top. And that's the reason why we have this inner group here. So this inner group is what we'll be using to put this general inquiry and the support request side by side, while this label will be on its own. And from this group too, I will display the and flex, and the direction is going to be column there like that. So the next one that we have there is simple too, which is this box here. So the next one is just simple stuff. It's just a single box, and inside that single box you have the label, and at the same time you have the text area, because don't forget this one is text area. Anytime you have a box that you can type and the text is going to span multiple line, you know that what you need to use here is text area. So here, what do we need to do? We need to go down to this side again. Let me be closing each one of the group. So this is the group for our query type. This is a group for email address. This is a group for the first name and the last name here. So this is a group for that. As you can see, we have the H1, we have the group for first name and the last name, we have the group for this email address, we have the group for this query type, and at the same time, we have the group for this one. So I'm going to use this one too, which is going to be div, then form group like this. You can call it anything. Your styling is what is going to, but it's always good that you use the name that is describing what you are doing there. That's why I call it form group, because it's going to group some items together. So this one, label for message. This thing, I don't need BR. So we don't need BR when you're working with your normal CSS. So here we have text area. And what is the text area there for? What's wrong with this? So we have the text area. So let me remove all this unnecessary stuff that this thing is generating for me. Let me remove all this unnecessary stuff. So save. Because what we just need is only the label and the text area there. So I don't need this row and column. I'm going to do that from the CSS side like this. So something is missing here. Where's my L? So save and save. Yeah. So for this form group, we have the label, which is this message, and from there we have the text area. Something is wrong with this thing. Something is wrong. Why is it not formatting my code? Okay, now everything is back. So yeah, we have this group, and the next one that we have here is this your input here, which is the checkbox. And if you look at these two, you see that they are placed side by side too. And since they are placed side by side, we need to put them in a group. Because if you don't put them in a group, it's going to stack them. So, and since we want this one to be treated as one item, we need to group them too. And from there, we place them together. And how do we do that? We need to give this one to a special name so that we can select it from the box there. So this one, I'm going to give it a class of accept term. So that's what I'm going to call the class. You can call it anything. And inside it, we're going to have the input of type checkbox. So we are going to have the input of type checkbox. For this is a checkbox. The circle one is radio, and the box one is a checkbox. So this one too should be accept term like this, so that it can be connected to my label. And where is the label going to be placed? The label is going to be placed beside it. So this is going to be label, and this is my label for accept term. And what is inside it? No, this is wrong. That's not the ID. The ID is accept term. And what is the text that is here? Consent to being contacted by the team like this. And lastly, which I mean that one is cheap, is just this button. And inside the button, we have submit. And since it's the only button on the page, I'm not giving it any class. The only thing I'm just doing is the type button, because I can target it directly from CSS there, since I only have one there. And since the button is inside the form, it's going to submit our form automatically. And if I save this and run it there, we are going to have all these our elements on the page, but it's not going to look like the way we want it to be, because we've not really applied. And that's the one thing you guys used to do. The way you are creating the HTML, you always want it to look like the final design. It doesn't work like that. When you are playing with HTML, the design is not always going to give you the final one directly until you start applying your CSS. And that's where the mistake used to come from. Because if you are looking at it and you're expecting this thing to actually display on the page for you the way you have it from the design, you will start arranging this thing the way you are not supposed to arrange it, because it doesn't work like that. HTML is not going to give you the final design. As you can see, HTML is not going to give you how many inquiry do I have here? General inquiry. Let me remove one. So this thing is not going to give you the final design. You have to be the one that will use the CSS to make sure that everything is okay and is following the design that you want, because everything doesn't work like that. Look at the design, but if you check the page, it's not looking like this. But the arrangement that will make our CSS to make the design to look like this is what we just did right now. But when you are dealing with HTML, you don't focus your attention on the final result. You focus on the layout. When you are dealing with HTML, what you focus on is the layout. Is when you get to the CSS that everything will start coming into shape, and that's when you started looking at your design. That okay, this thing is not like this one is not like this. The first thing you need to do is that your layout must be done properly, because the layout is not done properly, then it's going to create a problem. What's going on? Coming. So if you go back to the first name and last name, can you see the group? There is a group there. There is a group that is focusing only on these two boxes, which is his first name and the last name. So from CSS now, through this class, I can make these two to be side by side on desktop, and I can make them to be on top of each other on mobile. That's it. When you are doing the HTML part, what you look at is the layout, not the final design. It's when you get to the CSS that you start applying the necessary stuff that you need to make them to be on top of each other, or to make them to be side by side. I don't care about the layout. I don't care about the CSS right now. Even though it looks like everything is just stacked on top of each other, I will change all these things through CSS. If you look at this general inquiry, this support, they are still placed on top of each other. But based on the arrangement that I have from my HTML here, I can place them side by side or stack them on top of each other. And that's the reason why the layout is very important. When you are working on this in here, when you are working on the layout, you have to look at all the design, like the mobile, the desktop. Then based on the way these two are being used, you are going to group them together. But the final arrangement here is from the CSS. But the layout must be arranged so that you'll be able to do this thing from the CSS. The first thing you need to do is that the arrangement must be done properly from the HTML. And once the arrangement is done, then you now use your CSS to arrange them the way you want it to be. But the layout must be done first in the HTML. But don't focus on, oh, because you are doing this thing from the HTML now, you've not applied CSS. Things are not, no. Look at it. The label and the input, they are side by side. But this is not the way they are going to be by the time we are applying CSS. And that's where we now start looking at the design, start applying whatever properties that we need to use to make sure that all these things are placed correctly. But when you are doing the layout, what you focus on is the arrangement. And that's why you see that I'm drawing the box when I'm doing the layout stuff. I'm drawing the box there. I don't care about that this thing will actually be placed like that. And that is why I'm not showing the result first. I first finish with this layout before showing the result on the page, because I know that the result is not going to be like this when you are just using normal HTML. The result will never be like this when you are using normal HTML. But by the time you get to the CSS now, everything will now start coming into shape. Not that you just go to the mobile, you arrange only mobile, and when you're not done, you now come back and say you want, no, it doesn't work like that. All of them are the same thing. The difference there is just that the stuff is changing based on the layout of the screen, based on the screen there. So if the screen is particular this, it's placing them side by side, and if it's like this thing, it's stacking them on top of each other. But it's still the same layout that is here. The difference there is just the CSS that you're applying. The CSS is what you are changing, not the HTML. You are not going to be changing the HTML. The HTML of the desktop is still the same thing as the HTML of the mobile. But the arrangement in the CSS will not be different. So you don't look at the final design from the HTML perspective, you look at the layout. It's the layout you follow when you're dealing with the HTML. But once you get to the CSS, that's where you now focus on the actual design that you're working on. So the first thing you need to do is layout. And once the layout is not done properly, no matter the amount of CSS you want to apply on this, it will not work, because the layout is not following the way is supposed to follow there like that.
Okay,
So,
so
any
sir,
question
if you
again?
look at the star, you will see that it has a different color. So why don't we just put a span stuff?
Yeah, that one now, if you want to do it, you know that you need to put it in its own element because
Yes,
the
sir.
color of label is not the same thing as the star. So since star 2 is having its own color, it means all this star now, they need to be placed in a span now. So you know span is what you can use to place elements side by side. They will still be side by side, but you can style your star the way you want. So if I look for all of them, so I can actually replace all of them. So let me replace all of them. Let me just use no. Let me just use span like this. So span, I will now put the asterisk. So later on now, when I want to start this star, I only call this span. And once I call the span, it will only affect what is inside the span. It will not touch this first name and last name. Label, we apply the generic setting to first name and the asterisk. But we need to change the color of the asterisk. And since you need to change the color of the asterisk, we need to place that asterisk in another element so that you can talk to this element without affecting other stuff that is there. And that's what we are doing with all this grouping too. That's what we are doing. That's what we did with this query here. If you look at it, inside this group here, I have to create another separate group down here because whatever that is going to be happening to this group, I don't want it to happen to this label. I don't want it to happen to this label. And since I don't want it to affect label, that's why I'm putting that one too in its own group. And that's what we are doing for this asterisk. But since asterisk is just one item, that's why I'm using span here. You can even use div. But the problem with div is that, it doesn't place content side by side. Look at it. They are still side by side, even though they are in a separate element. But assuming it's a div that I use here, you see that one will just go to a separate line. You have to be the one that will use CSS to bring it back, as you can see. So that's why I'm using span. I'm not using div. If it is div, that one will place them on a separate line automatically. But you can still bring them back to the same line by using your flex property. But I don't want to do that. That's why I'm using the span because it's just one item. But if it is more than one item, just go with your div because that one you are grouping more than one item together. Because if you look under this radio group now, there's a lot of things under it. And again, too, inside it we have this group which is having its own other two items. But because the span here is only having one item, that's why I just use the asterisk inside it like that. So this is how this thing works. Once you know that you want to affect a particular element that is going with other element, and you don't want them to get you don't want them to have the same style, what you do is you use your grouping element to separate that particular one that you want to apply a separate style on it, and you just target it from your CSS and you apply whatever you need to apply on the element there. So the first thing you need to know is arrangement, which is the number one thing. If your arrangement is not done properly, there's no way this thing will work. Because the arrangement must be done properly. If the arrangement is not done properly, then you are not going to get what you be expecting there. You now be doing something and you be say, why this thing is not working? It will not work because the CSS will not help you to lay out your content. First, you must lay out the content correctly. And once you are done with the layout, here the class that I'm using, you can use any other thing to select. But the major thing is that the arrangement here must be done properly according to the way you want to style the content on the page there. So here, let me go back to CSS now and let's start with our. So the first thing we need to do, let me create our font face rules because the font has been given to us. So font face. So what are our font family? So let me look at the style guide. What are they calling the font? Okay, they call it color. So this is the name of the font. The font has already been given to us, so I will just call it color. Where is color coming from? Color is coming from assets, fonts, and it's coming from here. So variable. So we include not italical. I want the normal one. So this is one is for when the font is normal. So we need to talk to it that the font style come outside now. Did I not close? Oh, I did not close this stuff. So the font style, anytime we mention the font style of normal, this is what it's going to use. But what if you mention the font style of italics or when you are dealing with italics, so we can create that one too. It's still the same name, so it's still going to be the same color like this. But this one is going to be, what's that? The italics one. But when is it going to use this italic? So when is it going to use the italics? Let me close this sidebar. When is it going to use italic? We want to use it when there is a font style of italics. So when we not font size, font style. So when we mention font style italic, this is the font we want it to use. When we mention this one, this is the font we want it to use like that. Let me wrap this into a different line. Coming views. Where's my map? Word wrap. Yeah, so that I can show on a different line like this. So as you can see, this is the font we want to use because this is not on the browser here. I don't have it on my system. I don't have it installed. But the project we are working on actually gave us the fonts that we have to use. So this is the two fonts. But one of them is italics one, and one is for normal text. So what are we doing here? We are telling the browser that anytime we mention this color here as our font family, this is where it's going to locate the font. But that one is when we are talking about the normal font style. But when we are now using the font style, the same name, and the font style is italic, this is the one it's going to load for us. So we are not connecting to external fonts. We are not using the one that is on the system because you don't even use the one on the system. Because whoever is going to be checking your site will not be using your system. You deploy the site. So this thing needs to display the same way it is on your system there. So that's the reason why we are using this. We are not installing it directly on the system because another way is just install it yourself and you just call the name. But doing it like that is not the way to go because people that will be checking the site will not use your system to check it. They will be using their own system. And if they don't have that font, which is not always possible that they will have all the font on their system, so it will not work. You just see that it's displaying this font here like that. But here now, since we already include the font in our project and we are telling the browser how to load the font, once we start using it, you see that everything will just change. For example, here now, if I select everything and if I use font family and if I call that color there, you see that it's going to use it because we've already explained, as you can see now, is not using the color as the fonts are there like that. But how does it know that this is where it's supposed to get it? We are the one that specify the stuff to the browser. Anytime we use color as font family, come to this side, look for that font there. If the font weight is normal. But if the font style rather is italics, then this is the one we want you to use. Because if you look at this one, the name of this one have italics. So here now, if I just use font, so if I use the font style, so font style of italics, what the browser will do is that it will not use this one again, then it will start using this one here. And that's what this thing is doing. As you can see, it will be using this one, it will not be using whatever that is here. But sometimes you don't even need to include this one because some fonts they can still work too, even if you don't include the italics one. But if you want to include the specific italic stuff, as you can see that the way it is different. The italic, this one is not bending like that. But if you disable this one, this that is really bending there. Because it doesn't want, the design did not want to use this one for the italics. It gave us a separate font that we're going to use for italics there, like that, when your font style is in italics. But now, none of the design, I don't think none of them is having italics, so we just add it there based on what the design is giving us. And as you can see, it's using the font. But don't forget, I always told you that anytime you're specifying the font, you should always put the family at the back because the browser is going to load the font. And while the browser is loading the font, depending on the network of the user, as you can see, it will be using the default one first before it will switch to color here. But putting the family at the end, you are telling it that to be using this family first until this one is ready. And when this one is ready, when the browser is done loading it, then it will switch back to the other one. As you can see here, there's kind of like a switch in between the font like that because it's using the default one first, but once the that one is done loading, it switch back to this color like that. But if assuming I did not put this in, you see that it will be using that old one first, which is the normal one they used to use before you switch to color, depending on the network. But since the font is on my system, I'm loading it directly from the system, it's really fast. But when it is online, it might not be like that because the network you'll be using there will determine the speed that the browser is going to use to download the font. And when the thing is downloading it, when the thing is downloading the stuff, which is this color here, use this sans serif. And once you are done, switch back to this one because this is what we want to use. But because the browser is going to download it first before you use it, so it will be using this one as the fallback. And once it's done, then to go back to the original. And that's why you see that it look like the thing is kind of like flick, that it's kind of like a flick on the page there, because it's trying to kind of a switch from this sans serif to this color depending on the network speed. And that's why when you go to some site, you see that it will be using one font first. Then when the thing is not downloading the particular font, it will now switch to the that normal font. There like that. This is what is happening. But first, let's do all our normal this thing. P0 that we need, which is the padding 0, M0, which is the margin 0, which are the basic stuff you always do, and comma side, box sizing should be border box like this. And if I save it, it will remove all this unnecessary space that we have in our page. So the next thing we need to do, let's set up our variable. That's the steps we always follow. It's the same step we always follow every time. And as you can see, these are the colors that I want to set, because we're going to be using them in different places there. And since I'm going to be using them in different places there, so I always love to set it as a variable. What's this thing doing for me? So I only love to set them as variable. I don't know why it's doing like this. So let me just call this one green 200 like this. So at the end of it, close. So this one is going to be green 600, so that I can differentiate between them, because this one is not just one green. That's green 600. We have this. So let me quickly convert everything. So here to convert the red. This one is not that much. So for this neutral white, this one is white already, so I can just say white. So this is gray. I can just say gray because I don't know this type of gray. This is gray 500. So just cover up, delete this medium, convert it to a proper color, move down, and again we have this gray 900. Close the space. Close the space, remove this one, and at the same time close this and save. So now we have all our colors that we need to use on the page. So the next thing we need to do is our body, which is going to be width of 100. So the minimum height of the body should just be 100 VH, because we always want it to have a minimum of 100 VH. Overflow X should be hidden. Anything that is growing on the X axis should be hidden, but nothing will go outside here. But you should always apply this default setting like that, because the container is just text. But if you have image, sometimes it's used to go outside of this thing. And what is the background here? We actually have a background color, which is our grain 200. So grain 200 come outside like this. So if I save it, as you can see, we have this body. But don't forget, we are developing for mobile first. Look at what I'm doing now. It's when I'm dealing with CSS, that's where I used to look at, okay, mobile first or desktop first, or which one of them you want to use. But when you are doing the layout, you have to look at both the mobile and the desktop for you to know how you are going to lay out the content. So you have to look at both of them when you are doing the layout. But when you get to the CSS part, that's where you'll be designing for mobile first. Then you now use your media query to scale it up later on. But the layout is not changing. You see that I will not touch anything like layout here. What I will be doing is to apply the style so that everything looks like the way it is on this, the way we have the design. But when you are doing the layout, you have to be looking at both the desktop and the mobile. And the reason why I'm not looking at the mobile a lot like that is because I know that these two are going to be stacked on top of each other. So you just need to lay it out properly so that you can put first name on top of last name when it is in the mobile view. And when it's now on the desktop view, then you just move them side by side automatically like that. So when you are dealing with layouts, you don't look at one design, you look at all of them. Then you group them according to the way you know that you'll be using your CSS later on. And when you now get your CSS, then you now start with that your mobile design first. Not that you just work on the mobile first, and when you're not done on the mobile, you now go and check the desktop design. You miss a lot of things there. You miss a lot of things because the way you are going to arrange this one, it will never follow this, because you will not be thinking about this one. You only be thinking about the mobile. And since you are thinking about the mobile, later on when you now want to do the desktop, the layout is not like this. And you now want to be applying CSS. You now say, why is this not working? It will never work, because the arrangement is not done like that. You only do the arrangement for the mobile. You don't do the arrangement for the desktop. Another way of doing it is now for you duplicating this element and you do the same thing for uh desktop. But that's waste of time because you are repeating yourself like that. And it's always good that you repeat yourself. Uh because if something change, it means you have to be changing it in different places like that. So let me go again. So we have the form. So what do we need to do? This one is having a background of white, border radius, please come out on time. Border radius should be around this one area. The box shadow should be 0, 0. On the X and Y is not moving. This thing should be 5 pixels. RGBA 0, 0, 0. You know this one already, 0.3. And save the stuff. You see that this is the shadow now. It's having a shadow. But this entire content here, the way I'm looking at it, let me see where's the original design. So the way I'm looking at it, because we are working on the mobile first, as you can see, it's not jam-packed with the edge of the box. So when it is on the mobile, it's not jam-packed like that. So what do we need to do? This one needs to have a width of, let me use that, 95%. So if I do a width of 95%, as you can see, the spacing is on the left, on the right side, is not on the left. Why? Because whatever you are doing with the width, it only happen to the right, but you want it to happen to the left. Like you want this spacing to be shared between the left and right. For example, now if I use 90 instead of 95, you see that there's a lot of space on the right, but we want this space now to be divided into two. One will go to the left and the other one will go to the right. I've already mentioned this in, there are two ways of doing this stuff, and I've explained each one of them. But here I'll be using the margin inline. I mentioned this method one time like that. So margin inline, which is talking about the margin left and right, that's margin inline. Margin block, that's your top and the bottom. So when you give it auto, it means the spacing on the left and the spacing on the right are going to be the same. So which means if you have all the spacing on the right, it will split it into two, and right will take half and left two will take half. So which means all the spacing you are seeing here, it will divide it into two. It will give left one and it will give right the other one. And if I save it now, as you can see, the space has been divided into two, one for the left and the other one for the right, based on whatever the space that is left. If I expand this browser now, as you can see, based on whatever the space that is left, based on that 90%, it will divide the space that is remaining there. It will give left one side and it will give the other one there like that. I hope you can still see my screen. This should be blank there now.
Yes, I can
Hello.
see, sir.
Hello. Can still see my screen. Okay. Let me continue. I just took the light, so, and this thing is being shared on us. How do you going to see it like this? You have to be here. Hope you can see my screen, Sha. That's the major thing. Okay. Uh Let me move it back because Nepa took the light and the screen where this thing is being projected is not there again. So let me move it, let me reduce it. So what are we doing here? We have the body, and inside the body we have form, but we don't want this form to take up the entire space because by default all elements used to take up their parent. Every block element will fill the parent, but we don't want it to be like that because if you look at the original design, there is little space on the left and the right, and that's the reason why I'm using this width of 90%. Look at your parent, then take 90% of it. But if it's taking the 90%, the remaining space that is left will always be for the right side. It will never be on the left side. So in order for this space here to be shared between the left and the right, that's the reason I'm using this margin inline. Margin inline is talking about margin left, and margin right. And when you say auto, whatever space that is here, it will distribute it. It will look at everything there. That space, split it into two, give half to left and give the remaining half to the right. And that's what this thing is to do. And if I save it now, see that that space now has been split into two, one for the left and one for the right. So this one here is just as if you are using margin left, which is waste of typing, auto, that's auto, then margin right, auto. That's what this one line is doing here. So inline is just talking about left, this is not margin, what's again? So this is margin, but here this is waste of typing because this single property can do the same job. Because if you look at it, it's just margin left and margin right. And this margin A line is working for like that. So what else do we need to apply here? Something is going on here. This 1 rem is too much. Let me reduce it to around that 7.5. And what I mean by that, this border radius is too much for me. So if I reduce it, I think this 0.75, which is 12 pixels, is okay. But if you look at inside the box, there is no space at all. The box is not having space. But if you look at the original design, you see that all the content, there is a breathing space inside the box. And you know what you need to use there, which is the padding. So since we need to have a space inside the box, we need a padding. And if you look at it now, we have the spacing. Margin, spacing outside of the box. Padding, spacing inside the box. So what else do we need? We need to place all these contents on top of each other. Even though they looks like they are on top of each other, but I cannot apply some of my flex property. For example, now if I use gap, if I use 2 rem, it will not work because gap doesn't work until you display as flex. If you look at it now, there's no spacing between this contact, the first name, the last name, the email, all of them just jam packed together. Why? Because that's the way the elements are going to be by default. I've already removed all the margin and the padding, so it will remove all those space. But now I want to apply the space myself. One way of doing it from the parent by applying the spacing there is by using this gap. But if you use it, it will not work. Why is it not working? Because it only work with when you with this display of flex. It doesn't work with display of um, block. It doesn't work with inline. It doesn't work with table. It only work with flex and grid. And what is flex? Flex is a container that you can use to place your items side by side or to stack them on top of each other. And by default, you see what it's going to do is to place them side by side. And as you can see, I can't see everything again. Why can't I see everything? Is because of this overflow X that I use on the body. Because if I disable this one, you see that I will be able to scroll left and right. But I don't want to be doing that because that's a bad design. You don't want the user to keep scrolling. But you know that this is not how this thing is. You're supposed to place them on top of each other like that. So what are we going to do? We just need to change our flex direction. And once you use flex direction of a column, you see that it will do the same thing. But now there is a gap because I'm using 2 rem, which is 32 pixels. If I change it to 1 rem, as you can see, that gap is going to be 1 rem. If I use 0, then there won't be any gap at all. And if I use 1, then it's going to put a gap of 1 rem there. If I use 4 rem, you see that there will be a lot of gap in between each one of them. But notice the way he's putting the gap. Notice the way he's putting the gap there. Oh, this thing is loading again. It's trying to connect to this one. I see my. All right, so this thing is back. So if you look at it here now, we have this box. So let me move it back so that we can see the two at once. So look at it now. Look at the gap. From the contacts, look at these two boxes. There is no gap in between them. Why? Because they are not item under the form. If you notice, or if you go back to the layout, you see that we have group. So everything that is inside this group, the form will not see them. So if you want to do anything with these two, you have to do it on this first last name box. If you want to do anything with this query, you have to do it with this query type group here. And that's the reason why you need to do your grouping very well. Because if you don't do it very well, by the time you start applying flex and you start doing the gap, this thing will start touching the element it's not supposed to touch. But if you look at it right now, everything is okay. What we just need to do is to go to the corresponding element and we apply the necessary thing we need to apply there. So time is really going. So let me quickly uh so yeah, let me return it back to 1 rem. So from there, let's talk about our H1. So let me just give it a font size. Let me look at it. Let me look at what is here. So the H1 is not that big, but currently look at our own H1. It's reaching the end here. But if we look at their own H1, it's not reaching the end. And we can use this one maybe around that 1.5 rem as the font size. So it's going to reduce it, or let me even use 1.25. Even though I've increased my screen, so it looks like it's big. So 1.25 is just 20 pixels. So that's what it's using there, like that. So what do we need to do? So the next thing we need to do is to talk to this group. Don't forget, we move from here into this H1. The next thing we need to talk to is this one here. So what do we need to do? We need to make sure that the spacing here is matching what is on the parent on the mobile. But when it's on the desktop, we're going to remove it. Look at it here. This is what I'm saying here. Look at this stuff. Look at this first name and last name. Look at the spacing in between them. But look at our own here. The spacing is not there. Why is it not there? It's because the two of them, they are in a separate group. And since they're in a separate group, we need to talk to that group so that this thing can work the way it's supposed to be. So here too now, we need to display it as flex. But this is what we need on desktop. So if I save it, it will give us what we need on desktop. But this one what we need on mobile. That's the reason why I have to arrange. Look at it now. I'm talking to this group. It's only affecting these two. It's not touching any other thing on the page. Why? Because we arrange them correctly from the HTML. So since this one now is only grouping this item inside it, these are the only thing it's grouping inside it. Those are the only thing it's going to affect. Whatever you are doing with this group here, it will only affect what is inside it. It will not touch anything outside of it. So on the desktop later on now, this is what we're going to do. And when we do it like this is the only thing it will affect. It will not touch the email. It will not touch any other thing. But assuming you are not grouping it like this, for example, if you are not grouping it like this, whatever you are doing from here, it will be affecting them. And since you don't want this thing, like what is going on here, to affect these two, you want to do them separately, you need to put them in a group. And when you are not talking to that group, there is no way it will affect any other thing that is outside of the group. This is not what I want. I need to change the direction back to column, because on the mobile, they are to stack on top of each other. And again, the gap should be 1 rem. And if I save it now, it will look as if everything are the same. So on the page, it only looks as if everything are the same, but they are not technically the same thing. And as you see now, everything is okay. If I disable this one, everything will be jam packed together. And if I bring this one back, everything will be okay. Why am I using gap of 1 rem here? I'm matching the gap here so that it will look as if everything are under that same particular form. It's not here because I can actually increase this one separately. So I can make this one to be 3. It will only affect these two alone. Because whatever you are doing with this group, it will only affect what is inside it. Anything outside of it, it doesn't touch it. And that's the power of this flex. And once you master it like this, you can arrange anything you want on the page according to the way the design is there, like that. So what do we need to do? Again, here we need this email. I don't need to talk to it right now because I'll be working on that one later on, because I gave it this font group. The font group is what I'm going to use to style my input and to style the label that is inside each one of them, like that. If you look at all this one, they are placed already, but let me talk about the form group. So what do we have? We have the form group like this. So what is our form group? Our form group is the one that group this first name and this one. Is one that group last name, this box. Is one that group email and this one. Is one that group this message and this one. Because if you look at it on the page, no, I don't think I put it on this. Yeah, I did not put it here. Like that. So let me put it there. Form group. Because I want it to happen to this one too. So yeah, the message is here. So anytime I style this group now, you see that all of them, they'll follow the same pattern like that. So what do I want to do? I want to display them as flex. Why am I displaying it as flex? Because this box now, look at the message, look at the box. There is no printing space here. So, but if you look at the original design, they are not jam packed like that. Look at the G. The G is actually far from the box. And since it's far from the box, we need to kind of give it a gap. But if I give it a gap, it will never work. Don't forget, gap doesn't work until you display as flex. If I save it, it will not work. You must display as flex first before it will apply the gap. Gap doesn't work until you display as flex. So that's why I need to display flex first. Anytime you want to use gap or flex direction or anything that's related to flex, you must always display flex first. Can either be at the end or you can start, but always display flex first. Now it will work, but it's going to create a problem. Don't forget flex is always placing them side by side by default. So we need to change the direction back to column so that it will still place them on top of each other, but that spacing is not there. But that spacing is much. This spacing is much. Let me use that 8 pixels. This one should be okay. Yeah, I think it's okay. So yeah, inside the form group, don't forget inside the form group, we have label. So inside the form group, we have label. So I'm saying the label that is inside the form group, I want to do something with it. What do you want to do? We want to change its color because the color there is not this black. The color that is there is actually this gray. I think it's gray 500. So let me just apply the gray. Now gray 900. It is gray 500. Let me see if it's using the same thing. No, it is 900. It's not using. Yeah. So it look like black, but it's not black. Oh, it just look like black. Again, to the color, be the font size. I'm going to use 14 pixels. It's kind of it's using 16 by default, so I'm going to use 14 so that it can look smaller there. And what is 14? 14 is just 0.875 rem. How do I know this in? I've been working with it a lot, so you can actually use 14 pixels directly. But I've been working with all these numbers since, so to look as if even this one said 25. Let me see 25. Okay, I think this 25 is okay. Like that. And as you can see that the input is getting to the edge. Without this form group, look at it. If I disable this one, you see that the form, see that they are not okay. But now once I apply it, why is it getting to the end here? Is because of this flex. Anytime you display anything as flex, whatever that is inside it will cover up the entire line. So we need to talk to the input too. So the form group, so we have this form group that is input inside it. But if you look at it, the color that one too is using is different. By default, is using this kind of I think it's using that same gray by default. So the border, that's what we want to change. The border should be 1 pixels, then solid, which is going to be that our gray, come outside. No suggestion. Gray, gray. Where are you? Gray like this. So I think this is what he's using. Let me see 500. That's what we have there. Gray 5, yeah. So gray 500. Let me look at it again. What do we have? Look at each one of them. They have curve edge, which is our border radius. So we have border radius. This is going to be around that 0.2. Let me see 0.25, and that's 4 pixels. So like this. Again, our box is not that wide like this one. Look at the box. There's a lot of spacing inside the box. If I type something here now, you see that the content is jammed back to the edge of the box. So what do we need to use? That's our padding. Anytime you need a spacing inside the box, that's padding. So the left and right should be, or the top and bottom should be around that 0.75 rem, which is 12 pixels. Left and right should just be 0.5 rem. So if I save it here, we should have that spacing inside the box. And I think this one is too much. Let me use 0.5. The same thing. Yeah, I think it's okay like this. But why is it affecting all of them? It's because they are inputs and they are inside form group. Don't forget on the page, look at it here. So form group, inside it I have inputs. Inside this one too, form group, I have inputs. So it will style all of them at once. That's the reason why this one. Even if I use this input too, it should still work for all of them like this. But at some time, you need to specify where the element is located. Because when you have the input in another place, in another element, in another group, but the styling there is different from the styling here, you have to specify the stuff like this. If I do it like this, it will still work because we only have the same input. But if you look at it, what is happening to all these inputs is not happening to this one. Why is it not happening? Because that one is not input. If you go down, it is text area. So if you want the styling that you're applying on this input to work on that one too, we can use that our or selector. So again, form group, then if there is text area there too. So whether there is text area or there is input, we want to use the same style. So if I save it now, you see that it's now applying it to this one too. If there is input inside form group, use this. If there is text area inside form group, use this. That's what we are doing. So whatever you are doing here, instead of me repeating myself or typing this in again for text area, I'm selecting both of them on the same line. I'm now applying one declaration to the two of them. So this one here, select input that is inside form group if you can find it. Select text area that is inside form group if you can find it. And if you can find it, just apply this style. But there is something with this one here. Look at it. So we need to apply this style. We need to change this in. Because anytime you're inside the box, it's changing the color to that black, which is the outline. But if you look at the original design, it's not like that. Anytime you are inside it or you're over, look at it. The color is supposed to be green, not this black. So how do we do that? That's over, or that's our focus state. Anytime you focus on your input or anytime you over on the input, the color should change or the border line or the border should change to that green. How do we do that? So what we need to do is to use this same form group again. So the input, anytime it is over, or so form group like this, the input that is there, anytime it is focus. So anytime the input is over is when you are on top of it like this. What is focus? Focus means you are inside it like this. So we want to change the color of the border to green, and we don't need this black stuff that is there like that. So the same thing too, I need to duplicate this in for text area. It's happening to text area too. Text area like this. So this has caused anytime any of this thing happen, like anytime any of this thing is happening there, I want to change the outline to none. That black stuff that you're seeing. This thing is, hey, I'm scared now because everything I'm saying is what this thing is bringing out. So now, as you can see, the color is changing when this is over. Once you're on top of it, this is over state. But when you click, that is focus. You can see that that black is not showing again, and the green is not the one that is showing. But I don't think the green should be that. Okay, it's that 600. So let me leave it like this. But here now, these are selectors that I've talked about. Input when it is over or when it is focused. Text area when it is over or when it is focused. So it will happen to this and it will happen to this because they are not the same thing. Text area is different from, but it's not happening to this one because the way you work on this is quite different from the way you work on the other one. The way you work with this checkbox is different. So now, what do we need to do? Like this. So we have this one, we have this, which is okay. We have this. So the next thing we need to work on is this our query here. Because if you look at the design, it's not the same. Look at the design. Where's the mobile? Let me go back to the mobile. It's still the same thing whether it's mobile or desktop. Because that box is always there. And don't forget, we've already created this group. So if I go back to my HTML for that one, look at it. We have this query type group, which is what we are going to use. You can use it to place things on top of each other, which is what I've already used this one. But inside it, if you look at it, we have this radio group. Radio group is this entire box here that owns this radio and this general whatever stuff. So if I click on this text, as you can see, it activates that stuff. If I click on this one, it activates. I did not really click on the circle. I'm clicking on their text. Why is it working? It's because the label and the radio are connected together. How are they connected together? The ID of the input is what I'm using as the for of the label. For example, now if I connect this one, if I said it is 1, what you are saying is that this label and this label, they are connected to this radio here. So which means if I click on this first one, it will activate this. If I still click on the second one too, it will still activate that one. Because this thing doesn't need to be side by side before you can connect them. What the browser is using is the ID of the element. And whatever ID that you are connected to this label, that's what is going to activate. So if I click on this one from now till tomorrow, it will always activate this fourth one because it is connected to that first one. But if I want it to be connected to the second one, it needs to match the ID of the second one. So I'm using this one to explain the ID stuff that he mentioned that time. So the ID is what you use to connect your input and the label together. Anytime you click on the label, it as if you click on the input. And why is it working? So if I click on last name, it activates the box. If I click on email, it will activate the box. Why? Because those elements are connected together. So this is 4. What is their email? What is the ID? Email. If you look at this one, what is the ID? Last name. What is 4? Last name. So once you have 4 and the ID of the input the same, then both of them will be connected together like that. It's not a must. It's just a user experience stuff. Not until they click on the box. Like this one now. I don't need to click on this, or I can just click on the text and it will still work. But assuming they are not connected together, you must click on this circle before it will do this same thing like that. So what do we need to do? Time is really going. What we need to do, so let's talk about this radio group and the radio box. So what do we need? There, this radio group here, we need to display it as flex. Why do we need to display it as flex? On the desktop later on, they are going to be placed side by side. As you can see, this is the one that is grouping these two. But on the mobile, they are stacked on top of each other. So what do we need to do? We just need to display as flex and we stack it. And you know what to do, because if I do it like this, it will place them side by side. But that's not the way it is on the mobile. So we need to place them on top of each other back. But they are two jam packed together. Hey, this one that this thing is giving me the suggestion of what I want to do. So we only work on the group that group the two of them together. But what about the each box? What about the each box? That's where this one comes in there, which is this radio. This radio box is the one that grouped both this label and the radio together. And what do we need to do with that one? That's where this circle comes, like this box comes in. Because if you look at it, this one too, it's having that particular box that looks like this. So which means all the styling that we're applying on this our input, we're supposed to do the same thing on this one. So since we need to do it, so I don't want to repeat myself because everything I'm doing here is still the same thing I need to do here. And since I'm going to do it like that, I just need to apply the same thing here. So what I'm saying here is that if there is anything like this, just apply it here too. Look at it. I can actually copy this in to another line, but that's bad practice. Once you see that your elements, different elements on the page are using the same thing, what do? You select all the selector and you just apply it once. Because if you look at it, what is happening here is what is happening here is what is happening here. But something is wrong here. This thing is not showing to me that it's something that is clickable. Look at the hand. This is not the hand. If you go to something that is clickable, it's supposed to show you the hand, but the button too is not working. Why is it not working? Because I've not really specified the stuff. So here now, I can come down because this one now is only happening to this one. It's not happening to your input. It's not happening to the text area. The reason why I have to put this one here is because it's sharing this property here. As it is sharing the property, one way of doing it is just by copying all this property here and paste it here like this. Then remove this one from here. If you do it like this, it will still work. But this one is repetition here. In case this one is changing later or maybe the color is changing to something else later on, it means I have to come back here and update it too. So whatever you are doing at the top there, you have to come down here to update. And that's the reason why I want to put it at the top so that I don't need to repeat myself. But I will just leave it like this. Both of them will still work. So what I just need to do here now is to display it as flex because this thing is not placed correctly. Look at the G. It's not placed at the center of this box. So in order for it to be placed correctly, we need to display it as flex. We need to align it to center. Align means vertically. So where do you want to align it? So if I save it, you see that the box, can you see now? The G and this one, they are now vertically aligned, but there's a problem. They are jam-packed together. And if you look at it, there's a space in between them here. So what do we need to do? What we need to do is to just apply the gap, which is going to create that space. Again, too, the spacing on the left and the right of this one is not matching what we have there. There's a lot of space on the left. That's your padding. So which means we need to increase the padding of this one for our left. This one now is using 0.5, but now we can change it to 0.75. On the left and right, increase it. Let me try one. I think that is not even. Yeah, so as you can see now, for the normal box, see, look at where that one is starting from. But for this one, it's starting from here because I've changed the left and the right based on the design that we have here. So what do we need to do next? What we need to do here is to use our cursor, which is what I was explaining before moving into this property. What is this thing going to do? It's going to give a user the impression of like, okay, this thing is something you can click. Or here now it's not telling the user that they can actually click. So the user will now be coming here. But users should be able to know that they can actually click on the box. So if I save it now and go there, can you see? Once you move enter the box, it will tell you that it is something that is clickable. But if you look at it, it's not happening to the text. It's only happening to the box like that. So what can I do? I can actually make it happen to the box too by just using this radio box. Then there is label there. For that thing is label. Again to radio box. There is a input there. And again to the radio box itself. So all of them, I want it to have a cursor of a pointer. So it's not going to apply it only on this radio box. It will apply it on the label that is here. It will apply it on it because if you go to the input too, as you can see, it's not showing that it is clickable. But now I'm not saying the box itself, the label and the input, all of them should be showing it. So no matter where I am inside the box, it will always show that it is clickable. So that by the time the user is there, they have the impression of okay, this thing is actually clickable like that. Again, too, the spacing between this and this is not what is there because if you look at the query type, look at this box here. The spacing here, it's really more than what we have here. So how do we solve that problem? That's the reason why I gave this into a class. You know, it's having a class or form group, it's using that generic class. But this one now, I can use it to modify anything that I want there like that. So we need to apply this one. So it's already flex. What we just need to apply is just that gap. Why did I say it's already flex? It's because it's having this thing on it. It's having form group. And if you remember, somewhere we've already selected our form group and we give it a display of flex. But what is there is gap of 2.5. But now we want the gap to be more than that. We want the gap to increase to, it will print the style from form group and the style from here. It will pack them together. Any one of them that is here before, it will replace it here. So here, if you look at it for the form group, what do we have? Display of flex, flex direction of column, gap of 0.25 rem. So since this display of flex and column are not down here, the only thing we just change is gap. It will replace the gap at the top and replace with this 1 rem like this. So and if I can even use 875.875 like this, which is 14 pixels. Because now the display of flex is there, is borrowing the display of flex from form group. Why is it borrowing it? It's because I'm applying two classes on it. Look at the element. There is a class of query type group and there is a class of form group. It will pick the style of this one and it will pick the style of this one. It will combine them together and it will apply it on this group. For this form group, this one will only take the form group, but this one is taking the styling from this and this, combine them together and apply it on this single element. So this is how this thing works. When you apply multiple class on the element, whatever style you are doing on all those classes, it will combine them together and apply it. But don't forget, if you repeat any property, the last one will win. And that's the reason why, that's what I'm mentioning here. And that's what I just mentioned here now. So look at it. We have display, we have flex direction, and we have gap. That's what we're doing from form group. But here now, we are now changing the gap. So which means it will replace whatever gap that this form group is using on this place. And that's why you see that the gap here is not the same thing as here, here. If I did not apply this thing like this, it will be using that gap, which is going to be the same thing. But now, I'm replacing the gap that is on that form group with the one that is inside this query type. Why is it replacing it? It's because this is what I typed last. Look at it. The form group is up. This one is down. So since it's going to be seeing this one last, it will apply whatever you have there that is clashing with what we have at the top there like that. So let's quickly finish this thing because we really spend a lot of time and it's close to 1 hour 30 minutes already. I will not even talk about the desktop or nothing much on the desktop like that. So let me quickly finish this part here, which is this. What is that? Yeah, accept time. So this one too, nothing much. It's just your flex property that we need to use there like that. So this one, a lot of time what you'll be using is flex to display flex. And why am I displaying flex? Because I look like this thing are not aligned properly. If you look at it, this contact here is under the box. Why is it under the box? Because we just place them like that. But now once you display as flex, you see that it will separate them. Can you see now? It will separate them. Before, it is like this. If I remove this one, it's just in them as one item because is just inline. And since it's inline, it will just place them together. But now once you display as flex, it will see them as item. One item on the left, one item on the right. And that's the reason why you see that it's not at the bottom of this one again. You see them separately. But what do we need? I need a gap of 0.5 rem because they are twitch and packed together. So if I save it, then everything is going to be like, can you see? So that all the text they are by this side, the box is here. So what are they doing there? They display it as flex so that they can be side by side, but our text is too big. So here the font size should be around that 12 pixels. So which is going to be 0.75 rem. That's 12 pixels. And again, to the fonts that all this our text is using, I don't like it. It's not using the correct font. So I want everything to be using the same font like that. So the same color. So I will apply the color on the body, which is going to be this gray 500. So whenever you apply, when you apply color on the body, everything that is inside the body will inherit that color. We have some property that some of these things used to be, they are going to inherit. So if I say color on the body, every text inside the body will inherit that same color if I do not change it. If I change it, it will go to whatever you place there. But if I do not change it, then it will be using where is it gray? Gray, no, it is E that they use. Yeah, 500 and save. So all the text by default will be using that color. Can you see now? All the text inside it are changed, but I don't think that's the color that that one is using. So let me go up and see. As you can see that it's not using that color. Now we can go to that one because we've already selected the stuff, which is this F1. We can now give it the color of that gray. I think that one should be 900 now. Not should be E. So it should be 900, and if I save it, that one will go to 900, while the other one here will be using 500 by default, like this. So the last thing we need to do here is this our submit button. The last thing we need to do is our submit button, so which is going to be button. So what is on the button? If we look at it, nothing much. What we just need to do here is to apply all this style. So what is here? The color is white. If you look at it, color is white. The background is that green of 900, I think, come outside. Yeah, 600. Then the border radius is going to be that 4 pixels, that's 0.25 rem, like this. The padding left and the right should be 0.5, no, 0.75 rem, then 0.5 rem for left and right. So if I save it, and scroll down again to the cursor should be pointer, or it's supposed to be. So right now, as you can see, it's not showing that. Again too, I don't like that line there. The border should be none, like this. So if I save it like this, you see that our button is going to change. This is it, like that. And again, it's showing that it is something that is clickable, but this border radius is, let me change it to 0.5. And say, no, it's too much. Turn it back the way it is. And now we have our form. So we have the contact us. We have everything placed the way it's supposed to be. But this one, let me see. Does it? Okay, it's not. But if you look at it now, look at this one is having rand is because of the inputs that I did there. So if I don't want it to have that one, I can actually target it by using this accept term, come outside now, and there's an input inside it. Border radius is 0 because it's applying border radius on this, but on the original design, it's not having anything. So if I go back there, like that, it's still having the border radius. Let me see. 1 rem. Nah, it's not targeting my checkbox. Coming, where's my accent color? Accent color should be that. Color should be that white green. Let me see. Are you targeting what I'm doing? So it should be 200. So anytime you click on it, you should be using, yeah, you've seen it. So 600 like this. Because anytime it is click, the color is going to change. So to style this box, it's quite different from styling your normal input. When you want to change its own color, you just say color of background. Oh. Background doesn't work. When you just say background like that, because this one is crazy. That's why it's not respecting my border radius. I don't want to waste time on this thing because there's a different way of styling it. As you can see, that I did not use that color of red because the way you style this one is quite different from the way you style normal input. Even though it is input, but input of type checkbox is not the same thing of all this like text here. So it doesn't allow you to style it like that. If you want to change that color, what we use is this accent color. And that's what, and that thing will be applied anytime you click on it. So once you remove it, will remove the color. We click, it will bring out the color. But I don't want to waste time on this thing because we spend a lot of time already. This one about 30 minutes like this. But we have the design now for the mobile. But how is the design going to look on the desktop? So if I increase my browser now, you see that the thing is not looking like what we have on this thing. So how do we make sure that this design it's looking nice on a desktop design? So what we need here is what we call media query. Media query is what you can use to apply different style based on the screen that you have there. So I'm going to enter the responsive mode because you need to go into developer tools. How do you bring out the developer tools? Is that you press this Control Shift I, or you click on these three dots if you are using Chrome. Then from there, you are going to see more tools, and inside the more tools, you have the developer tools. So what's the developer tools? The developer tools is what you'll be using a lot to see what the browser is applying or what is not doing there. Because everything that is going on the page, as a developer, you need to know what the browser is doing behind the scene. And this is where you are going to see everything that the browser is doing. One of the things here is the element. Element is the one that displays whatever HTML element you type and the CSS for that particular element. So if I look at it now, click on the body, these are the styling that is applying on the body like that. Again, if I click on the form, you see that it will show this the style of the font. So any one of them is not using, as you can see, it will draw line up. Once you see that line there, it means it's not using that property. It's using another one. Why is it not working? It's because this one now is using something else somewhere. And which one is it using? It's using the padding here. But if you look at it, it's put line here. It means it's not using padding of 0. It's not using this padding of 1 IM. Because when something is not going properly there on the page, this is where you come to see what the browser is using or which one is not using. And based on that, what's going on? And based on that, you know that, okay, this is what I need to do on the page. And again, too, it comes with this device emulator that you can use to see how your design is going to look like on different screen size. So we have some common screen size, like this mobile or this small screen. This one is bigger than this screen, this 320. This one now is around this 375 or this 425 here. So this screen here. So this is how it's going to look like on phone like this. So if you go to tablet, this is how it's going to look like on the tablet. If you go to laptop, like your own laptop now is emulating the screen now. Like this is your own laptop. This is how it's going to look like when you open it on your laptop. So this is how it's going to look like. But for my own laptop, it is 1920. But on 1440, this is how it's going to look like. But if you look at the original design, this is not the way the design is supposed to be. The design is supposed to be like this. It's not supposed to keep going wide like that. It's supposed to stop at a particular width. And again, these two should be side by side. These two too should be side by side. So how do you do this? You can quickly use this thing to emulate different screen size. On the mobile, we've worked on that one and it's looking the way we want it to be, even though it's not centered properly. But we just leave that one for now. That one can be done easily like that. But what we want to do now is we want to enter this tablet now. We want this design to look properly on the tablet design. That means the first name and the last name should be side by side. This general query and this support request should be side by side. So how do we do that? We can now use our media query. Media query is what you can use to talk to CSS that, okay, at this particular screen, I want something like this to happen, like the style. You know, everything that we're doing here, that's what it's going to use for all our screen. But here now, I want you to do something for a particular screen. And what I want to do, we have this media query here. Media query, we have the type. There's a video on this. I won't talk more about it because we have a video on this one there. And here, inside this place, that's where you specify the screen that you want. And as you can see, the AI is giving me this suggestion already, like that. So what does this mean? What this mean is that I want to apply some CSS on my element, but the only time it's going to do it is when the screen is bigger or equal to this 768. So the only time it will apply whatever you have there. For example, here now, I can just say form, and the background like this should be red. So what I'm saying here is that I want to do something on the form. Don't forget, before, our form is just having a background color of white. But now what I'm saying is that when my screen is equal or bigger than 768, I want the form to now have a background of red. So if I save it now, you see that the background will change to red. But if I go to a screen less than 768, it will not work. Because the only time I want it to work is when my screen is equal to or greater than 768. Because this mean, when you say max, because you can actually use max too. So when you say max, what it's saying is that any screen less or equal to 768. Because you said maximum is 768. So if I save it now, it will be working like that for small screen. But once you go to a bigger screen greater than 768, it will not work again. So based on this now, you can now apply different style or change the style of your element based on the screen size. So here now, what can we do? There. So we just need to target some of our elements and we just update them like that. So when the screen is bigger than 768 or equals to 768, like that, what do you want to do? So the first thing we want to do is that our first name and last name should be side by side. So how do we get it? So this is the class that we use that time. So what we just need to do is to change the direction, because the direction, if you look at it by default, the direction that we use there is column, but now we want it to be row, because that row is what will place the content side by side. So here now you can target it, and the flex direction now should be time. Right direction should be row. And if I save it now, you see that both of them are now placed side by side. But that's a problem. But we are going to fix that problem. The same thing too, we need to do it for these two. So where are they? Radio group. Where are you? Radio group. Yeah, this is it here. So the radio group too, you can see the column is what we are using for the direction. So we need to change that direction too. So this one needs to be no. So this one too needs to have a flex direction of a row like that. So save. You see that that one too now is going to place them side by side. But it's not working the way we want it to work. Why? Because we need to work on this parent too. No, the parent in the original one, or you see that is not going more than a specific width. So that one too, we need to select the form, and we tell it that it must not go more than a specific width. So what? How do we do it? So what we just need to do? This AI is listening to me. So the way, see, everything I'm saying is what is suggesting there. So the width, even though it's not correct, this is not what I want. So what I want to do here is max width. I don't want it to go more than, we said the width should be 90%. But here now I don't want the width to go more than a specific, which I'm going to try 500 first. So if I try 500, as you can see now, that is looking. But the next thing we just need to do is to make sure that this one and this one cover up the entire space. Again, to this one and this one cover up the entire space. But how do I know what is going on? Why is it doing like this? So that's where the inspect comes in, because you need this your place here to know what is going on in the page. Then based on what is going on, you now know the property to apply. So what is going on there? So if I click on this now, if you look at it, this is the parent, first name and last name. If you look at it, this is row. So we need to talk to this box and this box to take half. So this one, you take half of the parent, you to take half of the parent. So how do we talk to them to take half of the parent? So what do we use here? As you can see, start the first name and the last name. We have this form group. So we need to talk to them to take half because they are not taking the space that they need in the parent. That's why it's looking like this. They are just taking small space, but we don't want it like that. So what do we need to do? We need to talk to this first last name. There is a form group inside it. Now here now I'm not talking to all the form group. I'm only talking to the one that is inside this. What did I want to do? I wanted to have a flex one. Flex one means that if the first one is having flex one, the second one is having flex one. What I mean is that you two should take one space in your parent. The first one will be flex of one. The second one will be flex of one. So that means the total stuff is 1 plus 1. That is 2. So the first one will take 1/2. The second one too will take 1 over 2. That's what is going on there. Why did I type it once? Is because the two of them, they are just the same thing. Look at it, the form group, both of them have the same class. The first one, the second one is the same class. So when I apply it, it will just apply it to both of them. So it will do it for the first one, it will do it for the second one. And if I save it here now, can you see? What we are saying here, flex one means that you take half, you two take half. You must not be more than each other like that. So this one will take half, this one will take half. How is it taking half? Where did I calculate that in stuff? What is doing here is that there are two group there. So the first one is taking one, the second one too is taking one. That's 1 plus 1, that is 2. So that means the first one will take 1 over 2, the second one too will take 1 over 2. And 1 over 2 is just half. The other one too is half. So which one? It means both of them will now take half half. The same thing, that's what we can do for this one too. So we can just call this radio radio group. No, let me just select radio box directly. So this one to flex one. No, the apparent is flex already. And when you say flex one, what it's going to do is that it will look at all its items and it will make sure that each one of them take equal number of space. And since it's just two, this one will take half, this one will take half. If it is three, it will divide that space into three. Now each one of them must take equal space. So what the first one is taking is what the second one will take, is what the third one will take. But it will calculate the stuff automatically there. And if I save it to now, as you can see, it's applying the stuff. But I think I need gap here. So there's a lot of, so gap should be around that. Let me say 1.5 barrier, because they are two jam packed together. It's not like this one. As you can see now, I think one should be okay. Let me see. Why is it not having gap? Yeah, I think because it needs to match. As you can see now, we now have the design like what we have there, but we are not done yet because this one's supposed to be at the center of the page, but our own is at the top of the page. Why is it on top of the page? Because all these things used to start from the top and we to keep going there. So we can talk to the body. So we can talk to the body if you want to do that one. So if you want to do that one, what we can just do is to display the body as flex. And once you display the body as flex, you can now align and justify. Align now is going to be the vertical. Justify is going to be horizontal. So which means it will center it vertically and on the horizontal. The horizontal one is done for us already, but we can do the vertical one by just use align item. So here now display flex AIC, which is align item center like that. So it will look at the parent, it will look at his space and take its item to the center. And since it's only one that is here, that's why it's going to the center. If there are two, it will not work like that. You just see that. But if you want to do it too, you can justify it to center, which is going to make sure that but we already did with this horizontal one. The only one we just need is the vertical. So you see that it's working on mobile too now, because we did it directly. I did not really work on it for desktop. I did it directly because everything you do here is for all of them. But anything you're doing inside media query will only happen when the screen is above or equal to this 767. If you look at it now, everything is perfect. When it is on the mobile ID, like stack on top of each other, and when it is on the mobile, then it is now like this. And this is what media query can give you along with the arrangement from the HTML there like that. So this is how you can work on this thing. But this thing is not wide. We can do all those one later on. You can update this thing. But this time it's going to 2 hours already. So I need to stop this thing so that the size is not that big. And because if the size is too much,